Thanks everyone for coming to the Cover Crops talk. As stated, I co-manage the Dickinson College Farm with my wife, Jen Halpin, and we grow certified organic vegetables. We also raise grass-fed beef and sheep, and the produce that we raise goes to the college cafeteria, also to a local farmers market and a CSA program. We plant about 10 acres of certified organic vegetables every year. We have about 16 acres of vegetable ground, and we're rotating through that with vegetables and cover crops. I've been growing cover crops for about 18 years, and I feel kind of like an evangelist for cover cropping. I feel that it's a very effective and simple tool, the basic use of cover crops is a very simple thing that we can add to our farming systems, and it's effective at solving so many of the different problems that we might have on the farm, be it soil fertility, soil quality, nitrogen management, biological diversity on the farm, erosion control, etc. Weed control, I'll throw that in there. Before I start, how many people are actively cover cropping now? Okay, maybe about a third of the room. There'll be some of the stuff here will be a little basic, but I hope that you'll find some utility in what I have to say a little bit later in the talk. Those of you that aren't yet cover cropping, my goal is that you walk away from today feeling empowered to go home, not only to know how to start cover cropping, but more importantly, that you feel like compelled to start cover cropping. I think it's been a theme throughout this conference. All day yesterday and this morning, I heard various speakers talking about disease management through soil improvement with cover cropping, weed management with cover cropping, soil health overall with cover cropping. So it's just a cornerstone of a sustainable farming system. Whether or not you're an organic grower, you don't need to be an organic grower to benefit from cover cropping. Okay, we can all benefit from the carbon that we can harvest from the air, the nitrogen we can harvest from the air, and the improvement to our soil that we can make through using cover crops. So without further ado, can everybody see the screen okay? Great. All right. Things that we use cover crops for on the farm. Well, first of all, cover crop is something that we're going to grow and we're not going to harvest, right? We're going to grow a crop in place and we're going to incorporate it into the soil or leave it on the surface, but we're not planning to harvest these crops that we're planting. And so we work at our farm, we work with winter annuals a lot to protect the soil over the winter. Summer annuals when we have an open spot in a rotation during the summertime. We also do some interseeding of cover crops. We grow legumes, we grow grasses, we grow flowering plants. Oops. Okay, right off the bat I want to give a big plug for this book. This is how I got started 18 years ago. Managing Cover Crops Profitably. Okay, it's you can get it for free online if you go to SARE.org. It's an extension type publication. You can buy a hard copy for $19 from SARE, or you can also get it through Johnny's Seeds or other outlets. Okay, this book contains all the motivational information about what is good about cover cropping. It also tells you seeding rates, all about different species, when to plant, when to kill, things you can expect from different species. So this book is really invaluable if you don't know cover crops. It's a cheap investment in getting yourself started, so I can't recommend that highly enough. All right, so when I look at the farm from the sky, I like to think of, what can I do to maximize cover and minimize bare soil? Okay, when people at PASA, the Sustainable Ag Group in State College, or Milheim, and all around the state, when we talk about soil improvement, one of the things that they're looking at is days of living cover. Okay, how many days throughout the year can we have something alive on the soil, keeping the soil either protected or productive? All right, and so that's not such a great photo. Maybe this one's a little better. So this year, this particular looking at the farm from a hillside, I can see that we hit about 90% of those fields were in cover going into winter. Okay, there's some winter kill here. This is like a winter killed oat mulch here. These two fields that are brown. This is a living cover throughout the winter. That's a rye cover crop. And this is another cover crop that we actually grazed our sheep on. So you can see we lost some of the top biomass there. But the soil is protected going into winter, and the soil is hopefully biologically active as well. So we feel like if we can hit a high percentage of our fields in cover when they're not being used to produce vegetable crops, we're doing a good job. Obviously the goal of a vegetable farm is to produce a harvestable crop. This is where we're making our money, keeping the business going. So here we are excited about our sweet potato harvest. now the soil is, we're removing those sweet potato vines, we might disc them in, et cetera. So we don't consider our job done for the year unless we get that field seeded down to cover crop. Okay, so he's excited about having his harvest there going on, but then really the next step in that excitement is to get the soil protected and start building the biomass for next season's harvest or next season's soil improvement. And I have kind of a limited perspective up here. How's the lighting? Can everybody see the slides okay?
It's a little dark, but the camera crew needs the lights up for their work.
Okay. All right, well, I'll leave that to you guys and the camera crew. Okay, so what this slide meant to show is there's my wife, Jen, and she's harvesting some veggies in one of our fall fields. And there's a strip of green. We've got some spinach being harvested there, and then there's a strip of green that's been planted to cover crop. So one of the ways that we get to trying to maximize cover cropping throughout the farm throughout the year is that we have, whenever we have a window where we see, we've got this field almost all the way harvested out, we're going to till what's possible there and get a cover crop in. So try to take advantage of the cover cropping window. Okay, so some of the benefits of cover cropping, obviously soil protection, all right? Erosion by wind, by rain, and beating on the soil surface by sun. They are, in nature, we don't normally see bare soil in nature, right? Unless there's a flood or a landslide or something. Nature very, very seldom leaves the soil bare, so the soil is protected, okay? If we don't have soil protection by plant material, we're going to have erosion by wind and rain, and soil splash when you have heavy rainstorms is also very hard on the soil. So having a living cover or a dead cover crop out there is going to protect the soil through residue. Building biomass in the soil is something we can do very cheaply through cover cropping. Okay, we can build living biomass and add organic material to the soil by growing these cover crops. So we're feeding the soil food web. Having that organic matter in the soil is going to increase our tilth, which makes the soil easier to work. It increases our water holding capacity, which helps with drought resilience. As an aside there are some farmers here in Pennsylvania that grow vegetables without irrigation. Okay, I visited the Nordellis farm, Beech Grove farm up in Trout Run, Pennsylvania. They are very extensive cover croppers. They do not irrigate their vegetable farm, and they have enough soil organic matter that sponge carries them through the dry times. So that just shows the value, I think, of adding cover crop as a way to build that sponge in the soil. Okay, increasing the healthy microbial activity in the soil is another cornerstone of disease resistance as well. Okay, Beth Gugino this morning talked about cucurbit diseases, and one of the things she's mentioning is if we can add organic living activity into the soil, we can help to, that's one of the parts of disease resistance. Okay, and lastly, having these living roots in the soil helps to build mycorrhizae. Mycorrhizae being a fungal interaction with our crop roots that can help to harvest water and nutrients out of the soil as an extension of our plant roots. So to get there, if we're doing tillage, which is an essential part of vegetable farming sometimes, if we can add some cover crops as well, that helps to rebuild the mycorrhizae. Okay, so just as an example of building biomass in the soil, this is a spring planted oat crop. We planted oats and peas in the spring, so we had some soil that was bare over the winter. We had a window in the rotation before the following vegetable crop, so we went in there early, as soon as we can work the ground, and we planted our oats and peas. This gives about up to 10,000 pounds of dry matter per acre when you can do something like that. So this was flail mowed down, and then we're going to flail that in, flail mow, and then disc. In about 3 weeks to 4 weeks later, we're going to plant that. Just as another example, so you can see the scale of the biomass there from the oats and peas in a spring planting there with the tractor. Okay, another nice thing about oats and peas is that they will winter kill. Okay, we typically plant oats and peas at our farm in about mid-August to late August or early September. Once we get past early September, we're going to stop planting oats and peas. But they're going to winter kill, so they'll grow right up until really the hard freezes of November and December. They start to die off. By springtime, that stuff is all dead. We go out there with like 1 or 2 passes of the disc, and we're ready to start planting. All right, another nice benefit is that we can harvest nitrogen from the atmosphere. Right? I'm sure folks are familiar with leguminous plants in general are harvesting the atmospheric nitrogen, putting it into their plant material, and that is available to us as growers. Okay, so for example, a crop like hairy vetch can harvest up to 200 pounds per acre of nitrogen and put that into the soil for our following crop. So if you compare, if you're an organic grower, which I only know organic fertilizer, if I was to buy 200 pounds of nitrogen and put that on an acre in a Fertrell, like a packaged product, which is a good product, that would cost me about $2,000 per acre in packaged fertilizer. Whereas the seed to do that same act on the farm by growing hairy vetch is about 130 bucks. Okay, so significant savings, plus we get the biomass and we get the biodiversity. We get these flowers here, which are great for our pollinators and other insects out there in the springtime. And the soil cover. Okay, another thing about nitrogen is if we have a grass cover crop, something like wheat or rye or oats, those plants are going to glean whatever residual nitrogen is left behind from the preceding vegetable crop. Let's say we grew corn or broccoli, what have you. We've got some surplus nitrogen left from that crop. If we don't have something out there, that nitrogen is available for leaching into the groundwater, leaving our system. Whereas if we have a grass cover out there, it's going to grab that nitrogen, put it into the plant material, and then we can have it again for next year. Here's an example of what the plant roots look like. If you dig up a pea plant, it's nice to grow legumes. I encourage you, if you haven't done this yet, dig up some legumes, shake off the soil or wash off the roots, and you get these nice nodules. This is where the nitrogen fixing happens. Okay, these are actually a little colony that's been established by bacteria in a structure made by the plant root. It's a symbiosis between the plant, the leguminous plant, and the bacteria there. And if you open these up and you see red on the inside or a pinkish color, that's a good indication that they are fixing nitrogen. Yes, go ahead.
If you haven't planted peas, legumes, and there haven't been wild ones growing, do you need to inoculate the field first?
Good question. The question was about inoculating with for legumes. I do recommend, if you have not grown a leguminous plant in that field, or particularly the species of legume that you're going to be growing, then you want to think about an inoculant. Okay, if we grow a lot of peas there and we're going to grow a pea cover crop, that's a pretty good indication we might already have that microbe in the soil. But if we're going into like something that was just continuous corn for a long time, and now we're going to say plant vetch or alfalfa, whatever, it's a good idea to spend that extra $10 on the inoculant. Because the inoculant powders are not expensive and they're not that hard to put out. It's an insurance policy in a way. At our farm, we don't use a lot of inoculants anymore. My wife is kind of like saying that she doesn't need it, and we do dig up our legumes and see the nodules are showing red, so we seem to be getting the good nitrogen fixing effect. Good question, thank you. So this again is oats and peas as a combo, getting ready to be mowed down. All right, so, oh, rats. Okay, I'm going to skip that part. I lost a graphic there, I apologize. Oh, there it is. Okay, this graphic, I got to credit to Charlie White from Penn State Extension. So the concept here is that if we're going to be harvesting nitrogen from the air into a cover crop, we want to think about a little bit about the timing of when we're going to incorporate the cover crop and when we want to use the nitrogen for the following crop. Okay, the idea here is that if we have a winter-killed legume, let's say we plant a lot of fall peas and we're getting a nitrogen harvest at that point and they winter kill, then we might actually see some leaching of that nitrogen into the soil, into the groundwater, what have you, over the winter months because there's no plant there actively taking up that nitrogen. Okay, if we have a winter hardy legume like vetch, the nitrogen from that is actually going to be available during the same growing window as when we might need it for the corn. So this green arc here represents the use of nitrogen by corn. So say that the peak nitrogen demand for the corn might be in August. That's about when the nitrogen is available from that winter hardy legume like a hairy vetch. Okay, whereas over here, if we just grow a winter cover crop like rye is going to take nitrogen from the soil and put it into the biomass. but that biomass won't give back that nitrogen back to the soil for right away. It's more of an extended release. So that rye, if we just had a rye cover crop and we're expecting some kind of nitrogen credit from that, we might actually not get that nitrogen credit until after the corn needed it. Okay, so this is complicated. We don't actually study this chart when we're making our planting decisions, but it is something that we could think about if we're wanted to assess some nitrogen credits from our crops before we buy more nitrogen or add nitrogen to the cropping system. Okay, hopefully that's helpful. One thing that I do want to point out is this idea that if our carbon to nitrogen ratio is low, in a leguminous plant, the carbon to nitrogen ratio is low. It's more nitrogen per unit of biomass than, say, a grass plant. So if our carbon to nitrogen ratio is low, that plant itself is going to give nitrogen back to the soil more readily than if we have like a dry carbonaceous plant. So if we have a C to N ratio that's high, like above 30, that's more thinking of like a dry oats or a dry rye plant. And that actually is going to take nitrogen from the soil to decompose before it gives it back. Okay, so we can have a nitrogen tie-up. If you were to take a tall grass cover that's dry, mow it down, till it into the soil, and go out and plant your cash crop soon after that, you might actually expect a nitrogen deficit rather than a nitrogen credit in the short run. Okay, other things we can use cover crops for, nice taprooted things like the forage radish. They are good at penetrating the soil, and they used to call these tillage radishes. Okay, so we can, if we have a hard pan and we got a soil that's got poor drainage, we can plant a lot of this tillage radish, and it will grow down and actually puncture through that soil hard pan and leave a channel that will rot, and then our plant roots can follow that down. So these are a lot of fun. They're easy to grow. They got to be planted kind of early, like August, around here. They also make nice forage for livestock. Okay, so we had a cover crop out there. We put the sheep out. They took some of the biomass off the top. We were careful not to graze down too hard. You can see here's going into winter. It's all winter killing. This will be very easy to work down in the springtime to go into the following crop. And that's just an example of one of the roots. It's about an 8-inch taproot that we got there from the daikon. They can be much larger. I've seen them a foot long, 2 feet long, etc. So, okay. And again, the sheep, they really like that biomass. So we're using it as a dual purpose, a forage crop for our livestock. We're getting some nutrition to the animals, some manure on the field at the same time, and then also getting some soil improvement via the biomass. Okay, another benefit potentially is weed control. Okay, if you've got a window during the summer where you're not going to be using some of your fields, a really easy crop to grow is buckwheat. Okay, we just go out there, we broadcast buckwheat at the appropriate rate. We rake it in with with a disc or a harrow, and it doesn't need to be irrigated. It's very drought tolerant. It comes up, it covers the soil very rapidly, and it will outcompete the weeds. Okay, it's even growing faster than weeds. One other great thing about buckwheat is all these flowers, which I'll talk about here in a second. So if we have a open spot on the farm during the summer, we try to plant buckwheat there all the time. Okay, unless we're going to do a bare fallow, this is a nice alternative. And it doesn't make a ton of biomass, but it's easy to grow, it's fast, and it's great weed control and good for the bees. Another thing that some cover crops will do is called allelopathy, where weed seed germination will be reduced by exudates from certain plants. So I think rye is a good example. If you have a rye crop going in the field, it will actually exude substances that will limit germination of weeds that are around it. Okay, so kind of chemical warfare. Here's an example of, this is a rye cover crop. This is a fall vegetable field. We planted this area to rye because we had the opening there. This area was in lettuce till late, so we didn't get a cover crop in there, and I'm not sure how well you can see it, but that's all chickweed. Okay, so this whole field is infested with chickweed, but the rye outcompeted the chickweed, where we got that rye planted, where we had it open. Now we've got flowering chickweed, protecting the soil, which is great, but also dropping chickweed seeds and giving us a nightmare for forever, essentially. Okay, beneficial organism habitat, also a great thing, right? So if you've got pollinators on your farm, if you want, hopefully we all have beneficial insects out there doing some kind of parasitism or other good work for us. Also, we think about the worms, other microbes that are living in the soil. They all benefit from having cover crops growing, especially if you have a flowering cover crop. This one here is buckwheat, and Okay, that is a video, believe it or not. So imagine, if you will, you're in this field in the summertime. This whole field was just abuzz with bees. Okay, bees, but also wasps and other insects that I am not smart enough to identify. All right, but this field is just literally buzzing with insects, and we're feeding all that biodiversity on the farm. Ideally, most of it is beneficial, and certainly helping our pollinators out. Okay, so it's a nice thing to hear. It's a nice thing to see, to know that we're helping the honey farmer down the road, et cetera. Go ahead.
Don't you have to be careful when they go into seed?
Yes, buckwheat, you do have to be careful with it going to seed. So if you do plant buckwheat, keep an eye on it. Okay, when it gets to this stage, we're out there every couple days checking for seed pods or the little growths that are making. And once we start to have the soft growths, we'll get out there and just disc it right down. That you don't even have to mow this down. It's so nice and soft that it's a 1 or 2 discings and it's worked back in. Go ahead.
Could you not put animals on that for forage? Because the buckwheat is like a rhubarb, I mean, it's not, isn't it good to eat?
Question was about eating the buckwheat to forage for livestock. I honestly don't know. That's a great question. I could try. We eat the seeds, but I don't know about the plant itself. So, good question. Okay, so let's talk about. Let's say you want to go out and try cover cropping this year, and you haven't done it yet. All right, so this is for you. All right, so first of all, we're going to try to. We have an open field. We see a window in our rotation, and we're going to choose a cover crop species or a mixture of species that is going to work for that we just want to try for this particular window. Okay, that's where that book, Managing Cover Crops Properly, comes in handy. You can help choose a plant species or a mixture that's going to fit in the timing window that you have in your rotation. We're going to look at the seeding rate and try to figure out our seeding rate in pounds per acre. We're going to figure out our field area. We want to figure out the length and the width and get the area of the field in acres. And then take our seeding rate and multiply that by the acreage to get the amount of seed we need for this particular planting. We'll weigh out the seed and broadcast it or drill it. And if we're going to need to incorporate that seed, we'll do that lightly. Okay, let me go through an example here for you. Sorry. All right, so this is a really useful tool on the farm. It's a measuring wheel. Okay, until you have all of your fields marked out and measured and you know how many acres are in each field, if you don't have that in a book somewhere, this guy comes out a lot. Okay, and we still use that quite a bit. Okay, thanks. So let's say we've got a fall window. Okay, we're going into rye and vetch. So the seeding dates for vetch are mid-August to late September, and about 25 to 40 pounds per acre. The seeding dates for winter rye are late August to late November. We've planted this as late as Thanksgiving and still managed to get it to grow. That's about 90 to 160 pounds per acre. You'll see there's quite a range here. If we're in the earlier part of the seeding date range, we're going to plant less. Okay, if I'm getting late into the range, I'm going to plant more seed per acre. Also, I'm going to plant less when I'm going into a mixture. So if I know that something is not ideal, maybe my seed bed is not very good, I might increase my seeding rate as well. Okay, but if I'm going into a mixture, I'm going to decrease my seeding rate for both crops. So let's say I'm looking at August 31st. I'm right on the money for vetch and rye, so I'm going to go with 30 pounds of vetch per acre, 120 pounds of rye per acre. All right. So basic measurements here. If my field measures 300 feet by 60 feet, I multiply that out, I get 18,000 square feet, right? I divide my 18,000 square feet by 43,560, that's the square feet per acre, and I end up with 0.41 acres for that field. And if you're not good with math, let's meet in the hallway outside and I'll go over this with you guys again, okay? I'm serious. It shouldn't be threatening. So I got my 0.41 acres. I multiply that by my 30 pounds of vetch per acre. So I've got 12.4 pounds of vetch. I do the same thing for rye. With my 120 pounds, I end up with 49 pounds of rye. What's nice about that, if this was me, I would just take a whole bag of rye at 50 pounds and not bother weighing it out. We do have a field scale that we take to the truck in the field. We keep a bucket. We get a big bin. We mix up the two seeds together. I'm going to inoculate a cover crop. I would do my inoculation at this time. Sprinkle out the right amount of powder, maybe a little bit of water in there to get them going. And this is what the rye and vetch seeds look like together. All right, from there, we're going to broadcast that. Normally, at our farm, we do mostly broadcasting. We've got a chest-mounted broadcaster. for small areas. If you've got a larger area, these tractor-mounted cyclone spreaders are very handy. Okay, they're not as precise, but if you're doing a couple acres, it might be quite a bit of time. We'll do half an acre by hand with the chest-mounted broadcaster. When we get into a couple acres, we pull out the cyclone spreader. But I don't feel like it's as accurate myself. Here's the inoculant that was mentioned earlier. So we'll broadcast that on the soil, trying to keep it even, and then we're going to work that in very gently. Okay, either with a light harrow. I like this Perfecta 2 harrow for working in a cover crop, or else a disc, a light disking. Keep in mind, I keep saying light. Okay, we want to only bury this seed about 1/2 inch to 1 inch deep. Okay, maybe 2 inches maximum. We've had experiences where we over-till, we plant it too deep, and the cover crop doesn't come up very well. All right, I put on here to treat cover crops as if they were cash crops. So if we think of our cover crop as something that's going to make us money in the future, we're not going to sell this crop, but if we improve the soil, if we can get some nitrogen out of it, et cetera, we're going to make money on our cash crop in the future. We're going to try to do a good job. So we do let our apprentices plant the cover crops, but we like to really encourage them to do it well. Okay, go ahead.
When you say you treat it like a cash crop, do you spread fertilizer?
Thanks for that question. Do we spread fertilizer on the cover crops? We are now in the habit of applying our compost in the fall before we plant our cover crops. So we make a compost that is not certified for use in the growing season as organic production. So we will spread our compost in the fall, then seed the cover crop, and use the compost to feed the cover crop. There are some people that will suggest watering your cover crop if it's like a dry period and you try to get that cover crop on. We don't usually water cover crop unless we are absolutely desperate in a dry period. But normally I would not fertilize a cover crop, but I will add compost to it. Thanks for your question. Okay, am I running out of time?
Yeah,
All right, so there's a lot more to say. I'm sorry I didn't get to it all. Do I have time for one question?
yeah, take a question or two.
Okay, let's take a question. Go ahead, sir.
Rye, you say ties up nitrogen. Will that leach away, or will that be there for the next crop, the next year?
Great question. So if rye ties up nitrogen, does it leach away, or is it there for the next crop? The nitrogen that is bound up in that rye biomass is eventually going to be available to your soil. So organic matter, if we were to do a soil nitrogen credit, the organic matter in your soil actually counts for nitrogen that will be gradually released back to the cash crops. So it's not nitrogen lost to the system, but it's not necessarily immediately available. But I'd rather have it in that rye biomass than in the well, essentially. Good question. One more. Yeah, go ahead.
What do you do between rows, like for cover crops? Because you said that rye poison.
Great question. So we've done clover. The question was, what do we do between rows for cover crops? We've done clover. We've done ryegrass. We've done oats. So those are some good examples. I would not do a tall growing cover crop like rye as between rows. All right, last thing I'll leave with, don't forget to kill your cover crops in time. Okay, if you leave them grow till they're 6 feet tall, you're not going to plant a cash crop right away after that. Okay, so we wait till our cover crop is knee high in the spring, and we're going to mow that down. We might even mow it a second time if it grows back. But if you let the cover crop grow this tall, you're going to be waiting a couple months before you have ground available to plant cash crops into. All right, thank you so much.